The vast majority of Fortnite players think they're way better than they actually are, and this inflated self-image is killing their chances of ever hitting true success in Fortnite. They stay stuck at the same level for months or even years, thinking they're just one lucky break or one better piece of hardware away from finally making it. But the reality is, unless you break free from that mindset, you're going to stay stuck forever. In this video, we're going to dive deep into what's really holding you back, how to recognize if you're one of those Fortnite players falling into this trap, and most importantly, what you can start doing today to fix it. So let's get straight into it. One of the clearest signs you're stuck in this trap is something that feels like a win at first, but slowly turns into a ceiling over time. Being the best player in your friend group. At the beginning, it feels amazing. You're the one clutching up when it matters. You're the one your friends rely on when things go wrong. You're the one getting hyped up after every fight. That kind of validation feels good, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying it. But what most players don't realize is that this situation starts to quietly limit your growth in ways that aren't obvious right away. When you're always the best player in your environment, you stop being forced to adapt. You start actually getting away with mistakes that would normally get you punished. You take fights that aren't actually smart, but because the players around you aren't good enough to punish those decisions, you still win. Over time, your brain starts associating those bad habits with success. You start believing you're playing correctly when in reality, you're just not being challenged enough to see your flaws. That's where things start to fall apart for most people. Because improvement doesn't come from winning easy fights. It comes from being exposed. It comes from getting put in situations where your habits don't work, where your timing is off, where your awareness gets tested. When you remove that pressure from your environment, you remove the main driver of growth. And what replaces it is comfort. You start playing to maintain your image instead of trying to improve. Then the moment you step into a lobby where you're not the best anymore, everything feels different. Your usual plays definitely start working. Your confidence starts to drop, you hesitate even more, you second guess yourself. And instead of adapting and learning from these moments, a lot of players instinctively retreat back into their comfort zone. They go back to the lobbies where they can dominate, where they can feel good again. And without realizing it, they lock themselves into a cycle that keeps them stuck at the same exact level. If you actually want to break out of that cycle, you have to make a conscious decision to do the opposite. You need to actively seek out players who are better than you, not occasionally, not when it's convenient, but consistently. You need to put yourself in situations where you're losing more than you're winning, where your mistakes are obvious, where you're forced to think faster and play smarter just to keep up. At first, it's going to feel frustrating. You're going to rage a lot. You might feel like you're getting worse at the game. You might feel like all the progress you thought you made is disappearing, but that's not what's actually happening. What you're experiencing is clarity. You're finally seeing the gaps in your game that were always there, just hidden by easier competition. And once you can see those gaps clearly, you can start fixing them. That's where real improvement begins. Another major reason so many players overestimate their skill comes down to mechanics, which is probably one of the biggest misconceptions in Fortnite. A lot of players base their entire identity on how fast they can build, how clean their edits are, or how flashy their piece control looks and creative. And while mechanics are definitely important in the game, they're also the most naturally developing skill in the game as well. If you simply play Fortnite consistently, your mechanics will improve over time without you even thinking about it that much. Repetition alone will take you to a decent level. That's why you see so many players who look insane in creative maps, hitting crazy edits, chaining builds together perfectly, and moving at high speed. But then you put those same players into a real match, and suddenly everything changes. Those creative warriors can't keep up with the skill and speed of a real match, because it's not realistic. And once again, real matches aren't about how fast you can edit. They're about decision making. They're about timing. They're about understanding when to take a fight and when to avoid one. They're about positioning yourself in a way that gives you the advantage before the fight even starts. And those are the skills that don't develop automatically. The real difference between average players and elite players comes from things like awareness, movement, positioning, and decision making under pressure. Elite players aren't just reacting to see what's happening in front of them. They're thinking ahead. They're predicting what their opponent is going to do next. They're controlling the pace of the fight instead of being controlled by it. Instead of focusing all your energy on looking mechanically impressive, start focusing on becoming more effective in the game. Build a playstyle that actually fits your strengths as a player. If your aim is your strongest skill, then take fights that allow you to use that advantage. Don't force yourself into overcomplicated situations just because they look cool. If you're good at reading players and predicting their moves, slow the fight down and play for timing and position. When your playstyle aligns with your strengths, everything starts to feel more consistent in the game. You're not forcing plays that don't suit you. You're not relying on things that only work sometimes. You're building a system that works for you and only you. And that's what creates real confidence in this game. Now, let's talk about something that quietly destroys improvement for a lot of players, and that's being scared of criticism. This isn't always obvious. Most players won't openly say they avoid feedback, but you can see it in their habits and you can see it in their gameplay. They don't review their games, they skip over their mistakes, and they get defensive when someone points something out, or even just calling calling them bad, and over time these small behaviors add up. The truth is, improvement requires you to face your mistakes directly. There's no way around it. Watching your own gameplay and seeing all the things you did wrong isn't fun. It can actually be pretty frustrating, but it's also one of the most powerful tools you have if you're serious about getting better. When you take the time to review your games, you start noticing patterns. You start seeing the same mistakes happening over and over and over again. Maybe you're overcommitting to fights. Maybe your positioning is off during rotations. Maybe you're not paying attention to third parties. These are things you might not even realize in the moment, but they become obvious when you slow things down and actually analyze what happened. If you want to take it a step further, don't just watch your gameplay passively, engage with it. Pause after every death and ask yourself why it happened. What decision led to this outcome? Was there a better option? What could you have done differently? This kind of questioning builds awareness much faster than just playing more games. A really effective exercise you can start using is playing a set of games where your only focus is fighting. Go into 20 ranked matches and intentionally take as many fights as possible. Don't worry about your rank, don't worry about your placement, just focus on identifying your weaknesses. After each death, write down the main reason it happened. Keep it simple. Aim, mechanics, awareness, positioning, or decision making. Once you finish those games, look at the patterns that show up in your gameplay. Whatever shows up the most is your biggest weakness, and instead of trying to improve everything at once, focus on that one area for the next week. This gives your practice direction. It turns your random grinding into intentional improvement every day. And this connects directly to one of the biggest myths in Fortnite, which is the idea that more hours automatically equals more skill. A lot of players believe that if they just play enough, they'll eventually become good or even a pro. But that's not how improvement works. You can play for hours every single day and still stay at the same level if you're not actively trying to fix anything. That's what happens when you fall into autopilot. You queue into games, you play the same way, you make the same mistakes, and nothing changes. It feels like you're putting in effort, but you're not actually progressing. High-level players don't just play more, they practice better. They go into each session with a purpose. They focus on specific areas of their game. They review their mistakes and make adjustments. That's what separates them from everyone else. If you want to start improving faster, start treating your time like it actually matters, because it does. Go into your session with a clear goal. Maybe you're focusing on positioning. Maybe you're working on awareness. Maybe you're trying to improve your decision making in fights. Whatever it is, stay focused on that goal throughout your entire session, because 1 hour of focused practice will always be more valuable than 8 hours of mindless grinding. It's not about how much you play, it's about how you play. If you really want to accelerate your improvement, you also need to start surrounding yourself with better players. This is something that a lot of players avoid because it's uncomfortable. Nobody likes losing over and over again, but that's exactly why it works. When you play against better players, you're constantly being pushed out of your comfort zone. You're being forced to adapt, you're forced to think faster, you're forced to improve. And even though it might feel frustrating in the moment, that's where the biggest growth happens. Now, let's talk about one of the most common ways people hold themselves back without even realizing it, and that's blaming their setup. It's easy to do. You die in a fight and the first thing that comes to your mind is your ping, your FPS, your monitor, your console. And while those things do matter, they're not the main reason you're losing. The problem with blaming your setup is that it shifts its responsibility away from you. If every loss has an external excuse, then there's nothing for you to fix. And if there's nothing to fix, there's no improvement for you at all. The best players focus on what they can control. They look at every situation and ask themselves what they could have done better, regardless of their conditions. That mindset is what allows them to keep improving even when things are perfect. And that's why you can see some console kids that will beat people on PC, because the PC players aren't focused on these things. They still think they need a better mouse or whatnot. And some console kids have just accepted that they're only going to be able to play on console, and so they improve on that console. Another mindset that keeps players stuck is selective memory, only remembering the good moments and ignoring the bad ones. And I know all of you guys do this. You hit a few clips, you win a few fights, and those moments stick with you. But the losses, the mistakes, the bad decisions, those get pushed aside. Over time, this creates a false image of your skill level. You start believing you're more consistent than you actually are, and because of that, you stop looking for ways to improve. If you want to get better, you have to be honest with yourself. Not overly critical once again, but you need to be more realistic. You need to look at your losses the same way you look at your wins, because your losses are where the real lessons are. The same principle applies to scrims and ranked. These are great tools for improvement, but only if you use them correctly. If you're just playing without a clear focus, you're not getting the full benefit of them. You need to go into these games with intention. Decide what you're working on, pay attention to how you perform in that area, and after the game, take a moment to reflect on what went well and what didn't. That's how you turn games into actual practice. But at the end of the day, there are thousands of players putting in thousands of hours every single day, grinding, playing, trying to get better, but only a small percentage are actually improving at the game. And it's not because they're more talented, it's not because they have better setups, it's because they have a different mindset than the rest of you. They're willing to be honest with themselves, they're willing to face their weaknesses, they're willing to put themselves in uncomfortable situations and learn from them. That's the difference between staying stuck and actually progressing, and that's the difference between them and you. Before we close it out, if this video helps you or motivated you at all, make sure you use code FLOWN in the Fortnite item shop to help support me. It supports me and helps me keep creating content like this for you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Once again, if you guys did enjoy the video, please leave a like and subscribe. Thank you guys for taking time out of your day to watch my video. I love you all, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace, guys.